Listen, I was in the middle of civil war in Central America that changed the landmark in the Americas forever. Over 1 million refugees came to America, yet America was not expecting the transformation that began to take place in the streets of Los Angeles, California. When I was a little boy, my father was my hero. He was everything to me. But one night changed everything. That moment, I felt like I died. My emotions died. My feelings died as I watched my father beat my mother close to death. And that moment was the moment that really catapulted me into understanding what hate looks like. And from that moment on, I chased that hate, wanting to get even with my father. And as I landed in Los Angeles, California, I wasn't ready for the transformation that started to take place in the streets of LA, meaning that the gang culture began to dominate every part of Los Angeles, California. You see, Angela, what happened was that America was used to understanding, the mentality and the environment of gangs, but not in the way of Latino gangs. They were used to mobsters, Chicago mobsters and New York mobsters, but nobody expected the explosion that took place in Los Angeles, California. And I was one of those kids that the gang looked at as one of the kids that was going to go forth and begin a revolution that changed everything. As a little boy, talking about 10, 11 years old, I got jumped into the gang and everything changed for me. My mentality changed. In one of the chapters in my book, I called it the baptism of the soul. That changed the way I looked at life, the way I carried myself. Yeah, Angela, inside of my heart, there was a void that I couldn't understand. But at that moment, I had to grow up quick. I had to grow up fast. And I realized at that moment that I was hungry to get even, no matter who it was, no matter what it was. And the thing about it was, it's not that I was strong and fearful. It was the fact that I was afraid of being loved.
Yeah, I have to ask you, Mondo, what is the appeal of gangs? What is it that draws young men such as yourself into gangs instead of saying, no, I don't want to be involved in violence and things like that? Why are you drawn into that?
A couple of things. One, identity. When you lose your identity as a little boy, or when you're not identified by your father or your mother or your family culture, then you have to go out and seek that identity somewhere else where you're going to be accepted. That's number one. Number two, I think we all yearn for family. And that family atmosphere has to change dramatically because family, at the end of the day, gives you identity. Whether you're doing family business, whether you're identifying in the culture of businesses, it doesn't matter. Whatever you're doing, we all want to identify ourselves with family. And the streets has a way to lure you in to give you an identity. And then on top of that, give you a family environment that is not positioned the way you think because there's a price to pay. And as a little boy, I couldn't understand that type of price. I just knew that it brought several things. One, as a little boy, I was looking for honor. I was wanting to be honored because the last time I was honored, my father took that away. Number two, respect. I wanted respect at any cost, and the gang gave us respect. But, those two things are the key that as a little boy, a gang member is looking for. Acceptance, identity, being able to be identified with something that is bigger than you.
Wow. When I hear you say at 10 or 11, you were jumped in. I've got a 12-year-old daughter, and you took basically the beating of your life to become a part of this gang life. And it led you down the line with drugs, alcohol, with violence. When did that change for you, Mondo? When did God intervene on your behalf?
This is powerful, right? Because I hated God. I hated anything that had to do with God. There was moments where people would begin to talk about God, and there was an anger inside of me because I began to think, how can a good God allow such things to happen to little boys and girls? How can a good God allow for families to be destroyed? So the thought of God, what filled me with so much anger, but not realizing that in the middle of the process of developing my identity in the streets and earning the respect and doing things that really no little boy or little girl should be involved in, At the same time, almost like parallel, my sister began to pray and fast for me. Isn't it amazing that you can live under the same house, yet live two separate lives?
Yes.
Here, my life was going one direction, and my sister was going a different direction. And she began to dedicate her life to praying for me and fasting for me and believing that God was going to change my life. My sister walked into my world where nobody wanted to walk into. You know, what's amazing is that we can talk about it, but one thing is to walk about it. My sister decided to step into my world when it looked dangerous, when it felt dangerous, and when it was dangerous. I had to understand that what she was doing, she was risking her life and her reputation to walk in and to deliver three of the most powerful words at that time that changed my life. She delivered, what if God is real? What if prayer works? And what if you have a different destiny? And then at the end of that sentence, she said, before this year is over, God showed me that your life was going to change. Prayer changed everything.
Wow. Wow. So tell us, we're on the edge of our seat here. Tell us that she delivered those words to you. What happened? How did God meet you? How did you meet God?
Listen, I was inside of a lowrider. That's a car. And that lowrider, we were getting ready to go do a hit. And I forgot that Saturday morning, I had promised my sister that I was going to join her to church. Yet everything inside of me was fighting to go to church, because if someone saw me walk into that building, I'm risking my reputation. My enemies will use that against me. And definitely my own gang will defile me because of the thought of being inside of a church. But I took the chance, and I write in my book that scenario as we're driving, we're going past that church. And I asked my homeboys to stop the car. We got into an argument. To make the story short, I got out of the car, and I knew that would be the last time I will see them. As I'm making my way up to that church, I'm hearing sounds that I've never heard before. I'm used to hearing Tupac and Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube. All of a sudden, I'm hearing these songs that I never heard in my life. As I walk up to the church and I get inside that building, I see nothing but gang members, and I'm thinking that my sister set me up. And I'm looking to the left, and I see guys that look like me. I look to the right, and I see the old timers that look like me. And I grab my guns, and I stand all the way in the back, and I can't see my sister anywhere. All of a sudden, the preacher that steps up to start preaching was a former enemy of mine from the streets. And I grab my guns, and I'm thinking my sister set me up. But before I can move, this man began to tell the story of a man that gave his life for me, a man that paid my sins. And all of a sudden, I started reflecting inside of my soul everything that I've been through, everything that I've seen. How can a God that died for me forgive me of my sins? All of a sudden, I'm getting ready to walk out, and there's an old hymn that began to play. At the cross where I first saw the light. That was the moment that my heart broke and tears came down. And that was the moment that the preacher gave an invitation to come and receive Christ. And you know what? I thought that was going to be it, but it was the next day that changed everything. When I showed up to my homeboys meeting, we had a meeting every Sunday morning. And when I showed up to the meeting, I was welcomed with a shotgun in my back, a pistol in my forehead, and another pistol in my chest. And they asked me, where were you last night? I couldn't deny. I think that was my first moment that I ever gave an evangelistic message, because it was my message, the message that I've been searching for: peace, love, unconditional forgiveness. And I gave that message, and that was the moment I knew I was no longer one of them.
How did they respond in that?
Definitely not with a party. For the next 3 years, they chased me. They went after me. They tested me. Walking away from a gang is not easy. It's almost close to impossible. But I believe that when you're serious about your decision, and I had nowhere else to go, that was my moment, either life or death. But for the next 3 years, I was tested every single day to see if the gospel that I had received was real or fake. They told me that if I ever come back to the barrio, to the gang, to the neighborhood, either God was going to kill me for playing games with him, or they were going to take care of me. Well, I never went back. And that was the moment that I knew that I needed to get back into church, go to Bible studies, do whatever I could to be able to understand what the change looked like. But I went back afterwards and I began to share Jesus with my own homeboys, and I saw a lot of them come to the Lord. A revival started taking place in East LA, and all of a sudden I knew that this gospel that was given to me, I was now responsible to go back.
Thank
man,
you,
don't
Jesus.
you love that?
Oh my gosh.
So did some of your former gang members, they became Christians then?
They became evangelists, they became pastors, they became missionaries. These are men and women that today they're still serving the Lord. They have families. They walked away from the gang. They understood the assignment, and that assignment was to understand that there was an unconditional love that was displayed at the cross that can redeem from our sins. So I realized that it didn't just work for me, but it worked not only for my homeboys, but now I had a mission to go into my enemy's camp and present the gospel to those that were my enemies once.